Hi, this is Born62, I'm Henrik Jyrs. Today I will be discussing positive thinking, not just in general because a lot of stuff can be said about that, but positive thinking you'll need when you try to change a negative motivation onto a positive motivation. In a recent video I talked about the normal human reaction when something bad happens in our lives, how we go to different stages until we reach a stage of acceptance and we start focusing on the future and what to do, how to move on, how to take what is left and create a new future for yourself. That motivation is usually negative. You have experienced something bad, maybe you've been laid off from work, maybe someone close to you died, maybe you were divorced, maybe you lost something, a relationship broke up, whatever. At that point, when you accept what had happened and needs to move on, usually it's not because you had some bright idea, some fantastic dream you want to realize, a goal for the future that is positive and thereby motivates you positively. It's usually because you accept and acknowledge the fact that you have to move on. You have to move on for the future. But that kind of negative motivation is really good at getting you started. I've talked about positive and negative motivation before. I suggest you view that video afterwards. But negative motivation is really a great factor to get you started. But usually you burn out if you don't get a positive goal, a positive motivation. Also, negative motivation is moving away from something, and that can be in all directions really. But a positive goal, a positive motivation has you moving in one direction towards that goal, and that is what we are after. So, what I'll talk about today is actually this: how to take negative motivation and by a structured positive thinking you can try to turn that onto a positive motivation. First off, what you need to do is to set a timeline, either in your mind or you can do it on a piece of paper. I suggest you use paper because sometimes stuff gets much clearer when we draw it or write it down. What we have in a timeline is the past, the accident that happened. It may have been your fault, it might have been the fault of someone else, or it might just have been a freak accident of nature. It doesn't matter that much. If you have grief, sadness, sorrow within you, you should not try to shut down those emotions. They are still there, and nothing good comes from shutting off your own emotions. But you also have to set the time in that way. You say, well, each day I'll allow myself to be sad, but I'll also have to take time off to focus on the future, what I'll do and so on, because if I just stay within that sadness, nothing good will come out of that. Then you have the present, and if the accident or whatever bad stuff happened is still ongoing, you need some kind of damage control. I was in a first aid course a couple of years back, really great course, and they told us the first thing you should do is stop the accident. If it's a traffic accident, turn off the engines if they're still running, because otherwise you can have a gasoline fire in your hands. If people who are wounded or hurt are crawling out of their vehicles, stop the traffic so they're not run down by oncoming traffic. If you look at who are there, decide what priority you'll give them. You might have some kid with a broken finger who screams and yells, and you might have an elderly lady who is bleeding very heavily. And often when we're stressed, we will take care of those who are screaming, but actually she'll die if you don't stop the bleeding, whereas this kid can live for 90 years more with or without his finger. So all this, the first thing you gotta address in the present is, have the accident stopped or will it develop further? If we say it has stopped, there's nothing more for you to do here. then you got to look at the future and says, whatever I do in the present will form my future. And that leads us on to the next bit, take charge. The future is your responsibility. If you don't take charge, then the future will happen anyway, but it's not you who determine what will happen. So you can say your life is like a ship, a vessel, and if you don't grab the wheel, you will be just drifting along the tide, or someone else will grab the wheel. In the words of Stephen Covey, you're the programmer. It's you who write the program for your life, and you can only do that by taking charge. That may be obvious. Maybe you just nod your head and says, of course I'm in charge. But what I've seen so far in my line of work is that a lot of people don't take charge. A lot of people are still in a kind of shock long after they have accepted the accident or what happened to them, and they don't take charge. They wait for something to happen, something good, a fairy to come and help them along and do some magic, and everything will be fine and dandy again. But you really need to say, I need to take charge. And it's actually a big mouthful, because when you accept the fact that you're the programmer, everything that will happen from now on will be your responsibility. And if you really let that sink in, it's a lot. Often I meet people who tell stories about what have happened in their life. And there are two kinds of stories. There are river stories and there are rod stories. A river story is like a river. We go from the past over the present, and the river flows on onto the future. We are in some kind of flow. Our life is developing. The rod story is like a broken record when you keep going round and round and round in the same rut. Usually a story about you being the victim of some accident, of some people who were not doing the right thing, and so on. And that is not usable. You cannot get a good future by staying in the same rut and looking at yourself as a victim. So take charge with all that it's really has in it. You're the boss now, you have the responsibility, you need to pull yourself together. It's often a hard bit to swallow, but you need to do it. And there comes the positive thinking really. Focus on your positive options. That means don't focus on all the stuff you can't do, all the skills you don't have, all the options you don't have, and so on. But focus on the skills you do have, the options, the possibilities that are available to you right now. It's like something you probably heard before, but the beast you feed is the one that will grow. If you feed the negative thoughts, they will grow and they will conquer you, and they will set your mind, and you will be stuck in that rut story. If you feed positive thinking, then you will be able to move on to a better future. So, focusing on your options are actually quite hard, but you need to do that, and you need to write them down. And that is the fourth point on this list. That is, list down all the alternatives you have. Let's assume you've been laid off from work. That's not a tragedy, but to some people it is. If you focus on your skills, if you focus on all the competences you have, all the qualifications you have, then you can write down a lot, and then you can look at the alternatives you have. What kind of job could you apply for? What kind of industry could you work in? What can you do? If you focus on what you can't do, well, there will be no alternatives to list down. So this is actually a structured way of moving from a negative motivation. It was here, you had to accept that something had happened, and then using a structured way of dealing with this onto a positive motivation. Because at the end of the day, you need to choose one of these alternatives you have written down. And there you have your goal, and there you have your positive motivation. In 2 videos that will be coming up very soon, I'll discuss how to find your skills, how to find your possibilities. There is a very practical exercise you can do that will make you focus on what you're good at and what you can use that for. Also, I'll talk about how you can choose between different options. Sometimes we have 2, maybe 3 different ways to go, and we are, well, in a dilemma. What should I choose? Where should I go? And I'll address that too and give you a rather simple exercise you can do either by yourself or with the help from someone. So this is what will be coming. Hopefully this will inspire you to try to think in a structured way when you have to deal with some kind of adversity, accident, bad stuff in your life. So I'll see you soon. Hopefully nothing bad will happen to you until then, or at all. But I hope you have been inspired by this. Bye.